Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 920. Serpent Beneath the Ninth Floor. Long chapter. Ethan's mind raced as the situation spiraled further out of control. Luna out. He had deliberately avoided using the Twilight War Spear during the fight with Harrison earlier. He had promised someone he would bring the old bastard back alive, and Luna tended to go a little overboard when unleashed. Now, though, he had no idea whether Harrison had even survived the aftermath. The odds were not good, which meant there was no longer any reason to hold back. Whatever this so-called temple master was down there had to be worse than Harrison. Silver light burst into existence as Luna materialized in his grip. The 7-foot spear gleamed coldly in the dim air as Ethan continued plummeting down the shaft of the spire. Normally, launching an attack mid-fall would be reckless, but with force synchronization he did not need solid ground to strike. Serpent's coil strike. He twisted the spear between his palms, sending it spinning so fast that it resembled a drill. The air shrieked as the weapon rotated, and the space around the spearhead began to shudder violently. A vortex formed around the whirling tip, tearing open a vacuum zone several yards wide. Go! Ethan slapped the base of the spear and the weapon rocketed downward. Broken stone, shattered beams, and clouds of dust were pulled into the spiraling force of the attack, wrapping around the spear like a raging dragon of debris. Push! The sound alone was terrifying. Ethan watched it descend, his eyes blazing. Even he had no clear idea how many skills he had compressed into that single strike. Ever since mastering the primordial forging art, his body had begun to feel almost bottomless. He poured skill energy into the attack, layered it again and again, then fused it all together with the forging technique. This was everything he had, his strongest strike yet. The entire spire trembled violently. Far below, the howling aura of resentment that had filled the depths was shredded apart by the spiraling vortex. Within seconds Ethan could not sense that malignant presence at all. Then a voice exploded inside his skull. "Kid, run." The roar carried raw panic, terror, and despair. Ethan blinked in mid-fall. Catfish? What? My attack won't kill whatever's down there. The dragon of consumption had spoken to him many times before, but never in that tone. There is no time. Go. That strike may not kill it, but it will release something far worse. The dragon's voice was shaking. It has been bothering me since we arrived here. Something felt familiar. Now I remember. For the first time since Ethan had known him, the dragon sounded genuinely afraid. What thing? Ethan was already moving upward. When he launched Luna he had dropped to the 5th level of the tower, but the spear itself had plunged all the way to the bottom. You have doomed us both. The dragon's voice was becoming frantic, almost hysterical. Ethan had never heard him like this. Whatever lay below must be something truly terrifying. He took the warning seriously. Energy surged through his feet as a vortex spun beneath them. The first tier of the primordial forging art activated, the bubbling spring acupoints opening fully. That was how he flew now. Combined with his travel form, his body grew light as a feather as he shot upward through the broken interior of the tower. Then an explosion erupted below. Boom! At the same moment a scream tore through his mind. "Ah!" It was Luna's voice filled with pure terror. "Luna!" The connection vanished instantly. Gone. "Master, run, don't." Her voice cut off mid-sentence. Silence filled his mind. From far below, a low chant slowly rose through the shattered tower. Any non-human that gains sentience is a demon. Demons must be slain. Boundless Buddha. Every syllable dripped with hatred. It was not simple anger but something older and colder. A cosmic kind of resentment. Ethan stopped descending. The dragon of consumption screamed at him to keep running, but he ignored it. Shut up. That bond he shared with Luna had simply vanished, as if someone had reached in and erased it. At that moment nothing else mattered. She had been with him since the very beginning. She was impulsive and talkative, yes, but when things truly mattered she had always been reliable. She was not just a legendary weapon, she was his greatest ally. How many times had she saved his life? Without her he would have died 100 times over. He had stopped seeing her as a weapon long ago. To him she was family. She called him master, but in his mind she had always been more like a little sister. That scream still echoed in his head. Whatever horror the dragon had warned him about, Ethan was ready to tear it apart. And there was still a chance, however small, that Luna had only been sealed. If he could find her and break whatever binding held her, that lively little girl might still return. A black figure suddenly shot upward from the depths of the tower. The man was dragging someone behind him, a limp body in purple robes. Harrison. The figure himself wore black robes embroidered with gold threads. He did not stop, nor did he even glance at Ethan as they passed each other. He simply rushed upward and vanished through the barrier of water far above. Ethan recognized him immediately. The temple master. Oddly enough, the man did not feel particularly strong. His aura was weak and chaotic, and resentment energy swirled around him like a swarm of vengeful spirits. Ethan ignored him and dove downward instead. He plunged all the way to the 9th level. Dust filled the air as the entire structure trembled violently. Ethan scanned the chamber, and his eyes widened in disbelief. What the hell? He had expected some enlightened monk or ancient master. Instead he saw a monstrosity. A gigantic serpent head protruded from the ground, its massive body still buried beneath the floor. Even with only part of it visible, the creature already filled most of the 9th level. Brother, Luna is over there. Yaya's gentle voice echoed in his mind. Ethan followed her direction and spotted the spear wedged between the serpent's head and the wall. Luna was driven deep into the ground. Golden light wrapped around the spear, binding it in place. Ethan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. She had been sealed, not destroyed. But the golden light surrounding her felt wrong. It shone like sacred power, yet something dark twisted within it. Two completely opposite forces had fused together in an unsettling mixture. On the other side of the serpent, pressed against the wall, stood the white-robed woman from earlier. Her entire body was trembling as she stared at the creature. The serpent lowered its gaze toward her. You are human. I will spare you. Ethan whipped his head around. Who said that? The serpent's tongue flickered as its enormous mouth opened slightly. It was actually speaking. What? There had been no warning or preparation. A giant snake speaking Buddhist doctrine was not something his brain was ready to process. Grab your weapon and run. The dragon of consumption urged weakly. Ethan ignored him and stepped toward Luna. If the serpent's attention remained on the woman, he might be able to retrieve the spear unnoticed. He moved quietly, slipping into what he hoped was the creature's blind spot. Step by careful step he closed the distance. Just as he reached out for the golden light, the entire tower lurched violently. The serpent's head twisted toward him. Its eyes were the size of houses and they burned with a deep red glow. The mouth remained closed, the tongue still flickering lazily, but four enormous fangs protruded downward, each dripping with a chilling aura that felt cold enough to freeze hell itself. Ethan tensed. Demons? He said slowly. You're the demon here. The pressure filling the room was suffocating, yet somehow he still managed to speak. A tree demon. For weapon spirits. And that one makes 5. Then there is a catfish demon and a loach demon. The serpent squinted slightly, as though studying him more closely. It had just listed everything within him one by one. Ethan's face paled. The tree demon was the tree of life, the 4 weapon spirits were the 4 city lord seals. With Luna that made 5. The catfish and loach were the dragon of consumption and its counterpart. All of them existed within his mindscape. Yet the serpent had seen them instantly without probing or using any technique. It had simply looked at him and laid everything bare. Are your eyes some kind of X-ray scanner? Ethan swallowed his anger. The serpent had not attacked yet. It had even promised to spare the white-robed woman. Maybe there was still room to talk. He cleared his throat. Great serpent. The things you mentioned are not demons. They're spirits. Weapon spirits. Weapons that gain sentience. And the tree spirit is special. The serpent interrupted him immediately. Anything non-human that gains sentience is a demon. I advise you not to associate with demons. If you do, I will have no choice but to subdue you as well. Ethan fell silent. According to this creature's logic, anything non-human that developed consciousness counted as a demon. Annoyingly, the logic almost held together. His mind spun quickly, then an idea struck him. Hey, great serpent. Do you know who broke your seal just now? The serpent's eyes flickered as golden light began to gather within them, though the glow quickly faded again and returned to red. It was. The serpent glanced toward Luna. Yes, her. Ethan's heart leapt. This terrifying monster might be powerful, but it seemed slow on the uptake. And do you know who threw her? Who actually broke the seal? Ethan stood there practically radiating smug pride. You. Perfect. Don't doubt yourself. Drop the question mark. You know she's my weapon, so yes, it was me. Ethan struck a ridiculously confident pose. The serpent recoiled slightly. You broke the seal. You freed me. Its enormous eyes narrowed as it considered the idea. Exactly. So technically I'm your savior. Ethan spread his hands. I saved you, so you let us go. Everyone walks away. Clean and simple. You're a Buddhist, right? Buddhists don't bite the hand that feeds them. He went straight to the point. The serpent remained silent, clearly thinking. Ethan did not intend to wait for the conclusion. Silence means consent, he said casually. I'll just take my things and leave. He stepped toward Luna again. There was no way he was standing around while this monster finished its philosophical debate. If the serpent decided to bite him afterward, he doubted he could even escape. One bite would end everything. He still had 3 gorgeous women waiting at home. He had no intention of dying here today. Coming down here had been pure impulse. Luna had been in trouble, so he had not hesitated. Now that the adrenaline was fading and he was standing face to face with this nightmare, the fear finally sank in. That head alone was hundreds of feet long. If the full body emerged, it would easily stretch for thousands. Just the weight of the creature was terrifying. One twitch could flatten the entire chamber. Ethan had seen plenty of bizarre things since entering this world, but this was on another level. Across the room, the white-robed woman stood stiffly against the wall. She looked like she might have wet herself. The serpent had already said it would spare her, yet she remained frozen in place, clearly too terrified to move. Ethan slowly extended his hand toward Luna again. His fingers hovered just inches from the golden seal when a voice struck his mind like a physical wall. Stop! The command carried absolute authority. Ethan's hand froze instantly. You would take that which bears demonic taint? The serpent's eyes flared as gold and red clashed within them. It spoke to you, cried out. You heard it and you came for it. This bond, this attachment, is precisely the poison that corrupts. The enormous head lowered until its eyes were level with Ethan. I have watched countless beings fall to this same weakness. Mortals who loved their tools more than truth. Gods who cherished their demon blades until those blades consumed them. Sentience within the non-human is always corruption. The weapon you cherish will become your end. Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't know her. I know enough. The serpent's voice carried the weight of unimaginable years. I have been imprisoned here for longer than I can remember. I was sealed because I refused to accept the doctrine that demon and Buddha could never coexist. They proved me wrong. Golden light surged in its eyes, then faded again. And now I awaken to a world infested with demons. Weapons that speak. Trees that possess souls. Creatures hiding behind human forms. You, human, carry an entire menagerie inside you. And you see nothing wrong with it. Ethan met the creature's gaze without flinching. Wrong? Their family. The word hung heavily in the air. The serpent went completely still. Family, it repeated slowly, as if tasting the unfamiliar concept. You would die for them. Yeah, Ethan said simply. I would. For a long moment neither of them moved. Then the serpent laughed. The sound resembled mountains grinding together. Foolish. Completely foolish. And yet, both the red and gold lights within its eyes dimmed slightly. I find myself hesitating. The head withdrew a little. You broke my seal. By any measure I owe you a debt. But I cannot allow demons to roam freely while I stand idle. Ethan's thoughts raced. It wanted a compromise. Then let me prove they're not demons. The serpent narrowed its eyes. Explain. Ethan pointed toward Luna. Her. She's a weapon spirit. Pure. She's never harmed anyone innocent. Never even wanted to. Release the seal and let her speak. If she's truly corrupted, if she really is dangerous. He forced the words out. Then I'll handle it myself. The serpent studied him carefully. You would destroy your own family if proven wrong? Ethan clenched his fists. If she's truly corrupted, she wouldn't want to exist like that anyway. So yes. Another long silence passed. Then the golden seal around Luna flickered. Speak, little demon. Your master has purchased your voice. The light pulsed once and shattered. Luna's spirit form appeared beside the spear, shimmering and weak but unmistakably alive. She looked at Ethan with her eyes moist. Master. You idiot. You should have run. Ethan grinned. When have I ever done what I should? She laughed softly before turning to face the serpent. Great. Snake, sir. I'm not a demon. I'm a weapon forged by a craftsman who poured his soul into his work. That soul lingered and eventually became me. I've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. And Master is the first person who ever treated me like a real person instead of an object. The serpent's gaze flickered thoughtfully. A weapon spirit born from craftsmanship rather than corruption. The serpent paused. Interesting. For a moment Ethan allowed himself to relax. Then the serpent's eyes hardened. But irrelevant. Those two words dropped into the chamber like a stone. Ethan blinked. What? The serpent's enormous pupils narrowed as its tongue flicked slowly through the air. You misunderstand something fundamental, human. The golden seal fragments drifted lazily around Luna's weak spirit form, their light still lingering like dust in the air. A blade forged with noble intent may still cut the innocent. A poison brewed for medicine may still kill. His gaze shifted toward Luna. You claim your existence was born from craftsmanship rather than corruption. That may even be true. Luna stiffened slightly. But the origin of a thing does not determine its end. Ethan's grin faded. The serpent continued calmly. Sentience within the non-human inevitably breeds attachment. Attachment breeds desire. Desire breeds suffering. Its voice deepened, carrying the weight of ancient doctrine. And suffering breeds corruption. The serpent's gaze settled fully on Luna, its red eyes burning with quiet certainty. Therefore, for the sake of the path, I must eliminate her. Chapter 921. The Little Monk. Author's note. Hey everyone. I made a few small adjustments to the ending section of the previous chapter. Because of that, I'd really recommend going back to reread the final part of the previous chapter before continuing, just so everything connects smoothly. Sorry for the inconvenience, and thanks as always for reading and supporting the story. Long chapter. Hearing the serpent's words, Ethan's eyes narrowed. Without hesitating, he lunged forward and reached for the strange light where golden light and dark energy intertwined. Screw you, you ungrateful bastard. I saved you, and this is the thanks I get. His hand closed around it. Zzzzzzzzz. The instant his palm touched that strange Buddha demon light, the sound was like raw meat dropped into scorching oil. Ethan's entire face twisted as agony exploded through his hand. It felt as though thousands of steel needles had pierced straight through his flesh. You know that saying, how pain in the fingertips shoots straight to the heart. Ethan had all 5 fingers buried in the middle of that thing, and the nerves in his fingertips were screaming in unison. Holy mother of! He howled out loud. He had never experienced pain like this before in his entire life. Felt like it was going to tear him apart. And yet he refused to let go. Through the pain, his hand clamped down on the shaft of the Twilight War spear. His fist tightened as he poured every ounce of strength he had into the grip. Aha! Immediately Ethan realized something was terribly wrong. The Twilight War spear, which normally felt almost weightless in his hands, now weighed like a mountain. With all his strength, he could barely move it even a fraction. Get up! His other hand shot forward and grabbed the spear as well. Both arms strained as he gripped it with everything he had. RRRRK. Boom! The ground beneath Ethan's feet shattered apart under the pressure. Slowly, with a violent groan of effort, the Twilight War spear began to lift. The massive serpent head that had been watching from nearby had not tried to stop him earlier, but now it let out a faint sound of surprise. It had absolute confidence in the power of that light. What Ethan believed to be demonic aura surrounding the golden glow was actually something else entirely. That faint dark energy with a now visible pink hue was not demonic energy in the ordinary sense. It was pure demon energy. The technique itself had another name besides Buddha Demon Resonance Light. It was called the Buddha Demon Magnetic Light. Anyone other than the individual who created it would be crushed by unimaginable weight the moment they touched even the smallest fragment of it. That was precisely how it had managed to suppress the Twilight War spear until now. And while the serpent had been lost in thought, Ethan had attempted to sneak the weapon away. In its mind, that should have been completely impossible. Sucker. Later, Ethan suddenly wrenched the spear free. The moment he did, the crushing weight vanished as if it had never existed. Because he had been pulling upward with everything he had, his body shot into the sky like a launched rocket. The Buddha Demon magnetic light still clung to the weapon, but Ethan no longer cared. The instant he grabbed the spear, his connection with Luna snapped back into place. Now he was shooting upward so fast that escaping the serpent head seemed almost guaranteed. Thief! Stop right there! The roar came from below, but by the time the serpent reacted, Ethan had already blasted out of the 9th level. Just as he broke free, a tiny child's voice drifted up from below. Thief? Who? Ethan frowned in confusion. Since when was there a kid down there? He had no time to think about it. In a matter of seconds he burst through the curtain of water above, blasting through 100 meters of lake water in an instant. Boom! The lake exploded behind him. Ethan quickly glanced around, trying to decide which direction to escape. A flash of light flickered and someone suddenly appeared directly in front of him. Thief! Don't you run! Ethan froze midair, staring in disbelief. Where the hell had this kid come from? Then the realization hit him and his eyes widened. You're that giant serpent? The child floating before him wore a Buddhist robe. His head was shaved completely bald, and on the crown of his head were 12 perfectly arranged incense scars. Thinking back to how the giant serpent had chanted scriptures like a monk earlier, a strange thought crossed Ethan's mind. Could its human form really be a child? I am Vasuki. Give it back. My Buddha demon magnetic light. The little monk glared at him angrily. Hand it over, or don't blame me for what happens next. As he spoke, golden light flashed in his right hand and a Vajra scepter appeared. At the same time, a soft pink glow shimmered in his left as a crystalline pink alms bowl materialized. The moment both weapons appeared, they radiated a faint aura. It was remarkably similar to the aura of the Twilight War spear, though lacking its deeper spiritual presence. Before Ethan could even respond, the little monk suddenly raised the Vajra and swung it straight toward Ethan's head. Whoa! You bald bastard! Have you got no honor at all? Ethan cursed as he reacted, barely bringing up his spear in time. Wait, what did you say your name was? Did this kid just say Vasuki? There was no time to dwell on it. Since the Twilight War spear refused to enter his spatial pouch for some reason, Ethan simply swung it up to block. Strangely enough, earlier it had weighed like 1,000 tons, but now it was light as a feather again. However, those gold and pink lights were still clinging tightly to it, refusing to disperse. Because of that, the spear could not be stored away. Ethan swung the weapon to intercept the incoming strike. Ting! There was no earth-shattering collision, just a crisp, almost delicate sound. The Vajra that the little monk had been swinging with such force suddenly flew straight out of his hands. It shot upward at terrifying speed. Within seconds it flashed once in the sky and disappeared completely. Huh! Ethan blinked in disbelief. Damn! You're useless. How do you drop a weapon that good? That Vajra had clearly been at least artifact level. Now it was gone. Who knew where it had ended up? That final flash in the sky felt suspiciously like it had pierced straight through the atmosphere. Did it just fly into outer space or something? Ethan glanced down at the little monk. The child was also staring blankly up at the sky, completely stunned. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly the kid whipped his head around and glared at him accusingly. You bad man. Wah! You stole my magnetic light and knocked away my weapon. Ethan stood there speechless. Completely, utterly speechless. The kid's tears came pouring out like a broken dam, splashing everywhere as he wailed at the top of his lungs. Ethan wanted to say something, anything, but the words refused to come out. For a moment he even forgot how to breathe. He had absolutely no idea how to handle this situation, so the two of them simply floated there in the air. One small monk bawling his eyes out and one grown man looking painfully awkward and helpless. This ridiculous scene lasted for a full 10 minutes. Fortunately, no one was watching. If word spread that Ethan Selim had bullied a child monk to tears, his reputation would be finished. Hey! Can you stop crying already? Ethan finally broke the silence. They could not just stay there forever. But this brat had been crying nonstop with no sign of stopping. No. Wah. Sniff. At least he answered. One word, though. What do you want me to do? Ethan asked, completely exasperated. He had never dealt with children before. Honestly, he still felt like one himself. The little monk ignored the question entirely and continued crying. Fine. Cry all you want then. I'm leaving. Ethan's patience was wearing thin. What kind of absurd situation was this? He had been running for his life earlier, and now it turned out this guy was nothing but a child. If he had known that from the beginning, he wouldn't have wasted his time debating with the giant snake. As Ethan started to move away, a flash of light appeared. The little monk suddenly stood directly in front of him again, still crying loudly. Seriously. Ethan turned and shot in another direction, but the child appeared there too. He changed directions again. Flash. He was met with another interception. This ridiculous chase continued for half an hour. By the end of it, Ethan felt dizzy. The brat simply would not give up, and the tears still kept flowing like a damn river. Was this kid made of water? How could someone cry for this long and still have tears left? And that crying noise was unbearable. Someone would think his entire family had just died. To make matters worse, the kid's speed was terrifying. Ethan considered himself fast. In short bursts he could break the sound barrier, but this kid seemed to teleport. Damn it! Stop crying or I'll smack you. Ethan finally lost his temper and raised the Twilight War spear as if he were actually going to strike. Ah! Murder! Help! Someone! The little monk dodged effortlessly. Ethan's swing, which he thought had been pretty restrained, missed completely. In that moment, a brief flash of cunning appeared in the child's eyes. Son of a... Ethan gritted his teeth. This brat had found his weakness. He could not match that ridiculous speed, and if this continued much longer, his reputation really might be destroyed. Not that he had much of one anyway. Fine. You win, Ethan shouted in frustration. Take this thing back. I don't even want it anymore. Just remove the suppression on my spear. He rubbed his forehead as he continued. And I'll help you find your staff, deal? Then we're even. After that we pretend we never met each other. Forever. But just as he finished speaking, a voice suddenly exploded inside his mind. No, no, no. You absolutely cannot give it back. It was the dragon of consumption. Why not? Ethan asked mentally, surprised. The dragon had been silent the entire time. I've been watching carefully, the dragon said. This little monk matches the legends of the young Vasuki perfectly. You're right. He was a brat when he was a kid. And that Buddha demon resonance light you're holding is his life-bound energy. He's the only being in history who practiced Buddhism while still being a demon. The dragon's tone grew more serious. Something went wrong during his practice and he became what's known as a wrathful Buddha. For some reason, that magnetic light responded to you instead of returning to him. That might be why he reverted back to his original childish nature. Ethan frowned. If you give it back, there's a good chance he'll kill you immediately. Wait. He's really Vasuki? The one from the legends? Ethan asked. The same one, the dragon replied darkly. I don't know anything about trapping any snake, but I do know this. At my peak, when I was 1,000 times stronger than I am now, he was the one who sealed me. The hatred in its voice was unmistakable. And now look at us. I ended up bound to you, and this brat got knocked all the way back to a child's form. The universe really does keep its balance. The dragon sounded almost gleeful. Ethan stopped listening halfway through, because the dragon's next suggestion was even worse. It wanted Ethan to capture the little monk, tie him up somewhere, and apparently discipline him daily. Ethan ignored that part. Still, capturing the kid and tying him up somewhere so he could escape peacefully did not sound like a terrible idea. He already had 6 children living in his head. Fortunately, Yaya kept them all in line. Even Luna listened to Yaya. But this little bald monk? He was a complete wild card. While Ethan was speaking with the dragon of consumption, the little monk rolled his eyes and pouted. That little catfish isn't wrong, Vasuki muttered to himself. Decent analysis. He folded his arms thoughtfully. But I didn't lose my memories. As for reverting to this form, I'm not completely sure why either. His gaze drifted to the glowing spear in Ethan's hand. And that Buddha demon resonance light? I don't even want it anymore. He scratched his head. Maybe it really was affecting me like he said. Practicing Buddhism while being a demon definitely had problems back then. That's what created the magnetic light in the first place. His expression shifted slightly. When you took it just now, my demon form was completely destroyed. Now only this human body remains. He paused thoughtfully. Though, his eyes suddenly moved, locking onto Ethan. In them was a strange look, part childish mischief and part ancient, calculating cunning. The combination made Ethan feel a chill run down his spine. Though what? Ethan asked warily. Don't tell me you want me to take you with me. He was already imagining the worst. If the kid really asked that, how the hell was he supposed to respond? This little monster clearly was not the peaceful type. Traveling with him would probably lead to endless disasters. I remember some old monk tricked me into practicing Buddhism, Vasuki said slowly. Then his face brightened. And I never had any disciples before. He pointed straight at Ethan. I want a disciple to play with. You should take me as your master. From now on, you'll follow me. He said it as if it were the most obvious and reasonable idea in the world. Ethan's jaw dropped. Yep, this kid was definitely a handful. Just as anger began boiling up inside him. Boom! The sky suddenly shook and a bolt of lightning split the clear blue sky. Crack! The lightning shot down like a striking viper, aimed directly at Vasuki's head. Ah! The little monk yelped and instantly teleported away. But the lightning curved in midair and chased after him. What the hell? His shocked shouting echoed across the distance. Ethan watched as the kid flickered from place to place at incredible speed, teleporting repeatedly while the lightning bolts twisted and changed direction, relentlessly pursuing him. What the hell? Ethan muttered. Disciple! Wait for me. I'll find you. Vasuki's voice shouted from far away. Then the single lightning bolt split into 2. Both streaked across the sky like serpents, chasing the fleeing monk into the distance until they finally vanished from sight. Ethan stared in that direction for a long time. Finally, he spoke quietly to himself. He's gone. Even as he said it, he could barely believe what had just happened. What was that? Was the kid undergoing heavenly tribulation? It did not look like it. When Ethan had gone through tribulation before, the sky had been covered with thick black storm clouds. But now, he slowly looked up at the calm, cloudless sky above him. Then he muttered to himself, could it be that he got struck by lightning for showing off? Chapter 922. Contaminated Energy from the Divine Realm. Long chapter. Everything had happened so quickly that Ethan could barely process it. One moment he had been arguing with that troublesome little monk, and the next the kid had been chased off by lightning that twisted through a perfectly clear sky. Still, one thing was certain. That annoying brat was finally gone. Not wanting to risk the possibility that the kid might suddenly reappear, Ethan immediately picked a direction and bolted. As for the parting shout about finding him later, Ethan could not care less. Forget whether the lightning would kill him or not. Even if it did not, Ethan was hardly alone. He had plenty of people around him. If the kid really came looking for trouble, they would simply surround him and beat him senseless. So what if he was fast? Ethan would happily introduce him to the ancient and reliable concept known as a group beating. Moving at high speed, Ethan quickly decided he was too lazy to keep flying under his own power. With a casual command, he summoned his mech. The sleek humanoid machine materialized around him, and once he set the coordinates, the mech blasted forward at full speed, while Ethan simply rode along inside. Before long, he had reunited with Victor and the others. When Ethan arrived, the area looked like a battlefield that had barely survived a war. The forest was wrecked, trees shattered or burning, the ground gouged with deep scars from violent energy collisions. It was obvious the fighting here had been fierce. Ethan had contacted Victor immediately after activating his mech, so he already knew the battle had ended. According to Victor, the fight had started shortly after Ethan left. At first, Victor and the others had simply been testing their abilities against the lower-level fighters from the Divine Sea Temple. They had been using the opportunity to hone their skills. Unfortunately, the temple members had absolutely no sense of honor. Instead of matching them fairly, the entire group attacked at once. Even their strongest fighters joined the assault. Victor and the others had been completely caught off guard. They had expected a series of smaller duels, not an all-out swarm. Fortunately, Uncle Jed and Hank had stepped in. They intercepted the two strongest temple fighters and held them back while everyone else dealt with the weaker enemies. The clash between the powerhouses had lasted nearly half an hour. Neither opponent had been easy to handle. One of the temple fighters had fought Uncle Jed head-on and managed to survive, barely. The other had taken on Hank. Their battle had been even more evenly matched. The two of them traded attacks back and forth in a constant exchange of techniques, neither gaining the upper hand. Hank's strength was clearly stronger, but the temple fighter had strange equipment that allowed him to compensate. The man carried some kind of ion shield that formed a glowing grid around his body whenever he activated it. No one knew where the Divine Sea Temple had obtained such advanced technology. Because of that shield, even though his strength was weaker than Hank's, he could withstand the endless barrage of wind blades Hank unleashed. Then everything changed. Hank summoned a massive tornado, a roaring pillar of wind that tore through the battlefield. The enemy responded immediately. With a roar, he threw a punch forward, forming a gigantic fist-shaped energy imprint that surged toward the tornado. The two techniques were about to collide, but right at that moment, Blackie moved. He simply flicked his finger. A tiny spark shot out from his fingertip like a flying sword and instantly merged with Hank's tornado. Boom! The moment the spark entered, the energy inside the tornado surged violently. A wave of scorching heat burst outward as Hank's swirling vortex suddenly turned blazing red. The tornado had become a massive firestorm. Even Hank himself stared in shock. Holy mother! Before he could react further, the enormous fist imprint slammed into the fire tornado. Whoosh! It was like watching a twig thrown into a hurricane. The massive energy fist shattered instantly. Before this, their attacks had clashed many times and always ended the same way, both techniques destroying each other in a stalemate. But after 30 minutes of fighting, Hank's energy was beginning to scatter slightly from exhaustion. Meanwhile, the temple fighter, though weaker, seemed strangely stable. His energy remained perfectly steady, almost as if he had an endless supply. Because of that confidence, he had not taken Hank's latest attack too seriously. He never expected such a sudden change. By the time he realized what was happening and tried to defend himself, it was already too late. The blazing tornado closed the distance in seconds. The man activated his shield again, the glowing grid instantly wrapping around his entire body. Then the fire tornado swallowed him whole. Tornado techniques were sustained attacks. They did not explode once and vanish. They continued grinding and tearing apart anything trapped inside. The shield proved surprisingly durable. The spinning vortex carved through the air with endless cutting force and blistering heat, but the glowing grid barrier held firm. No one could tell what kind of power source was driving it. It looked almost limitless. Blackie flicked his finger again, This time a small green spark shot out. Everyone clearly saw it. The spark resembled a tiny leaf shrunk down to almost nothing. In an instant it streaked through the air and plunged into the raging fire tornado. The tornado shuddered violently. Flames erupted outward as the spinning vortex expanded wildly. From the outside it looked like the tornado had swollen into a massive rotating fireball. Within seconds it reached nearly 100 meters across. But the expansion only lasted a brief moment. Then the fireball suddenly collapsed inward. Thud! A dull, heavy sound echoed through the air as the enormous sphere rapidly compressed. Its color deepened as it shrank. At a few meters wide it had turned dark red. At the height of a person it had become a terrifying black-purple flame. Only then did everyone hear the scream. Ah! No! The cry came from inside that black-purple burning figure. Pop! The sound resembled a balloon bursting as the flaming figure shattered apart and vanished instantly. Nothing remained except the suffocating heat in the air and the forest below slowly catching fire. It was as though the man had never existed at all. Everyone stood there staring. The earlier transformation of Hank's tornado into a fire tornado had clearly been Blackie's doing as well. The ability to interfere with someone else's attack without disrupting it, even strengthening it instead, was terrifying. Just how deep was Blackie's understanding of elemental power? What confused everyone even more was the green leaf he had launched afterward. That attack carried an unmistakable wood element aura. But since when did Blackie possess wood element? Everyone knew he controlled wind, fire, water, and lightning. For elements. Now it seemed there was a fifth. Apparently he had awakened it at some point without anyone noticing. With Blackie's help, one of the temple powerhouses died instantly. Hank did not waste the opportunity. He immediately swung his arm and launched a massive wind blade toward the opponent fighting Uncle Jed. That man had barely been holding his ground against Uncle Jed already. His only advantage was a strange pistol that fired powerful beams of energy. Now, with Hank interfering from the side, the man had no chance. Uncle Jed's spear thrust forward and pierced straight through his chest. Ugh! Useless. Divine Sea Temple is eternal. We are immortal. The man coughed blood while grinning up at Uncle Jed. Die! Uncle Jed twisted his spear. Bang! The man exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Immortal, my ass? Uncle Jed muttered, spitting in disgust. I'll make sure you die screaming. The blood mist covered his entire body, leaving him standing there like a blood-drenched war god. With their strongest fighters dead, the remaining temple members immediately panicked. They scattered in every direction like frightened monkeys. Unfortunately for them, Ethan's orders had been clear. Kill them all. The moment they tried to escape, Uncle Jed raised his palm. Dragon Child flashed into the sky. Her body dissolved into an enormous curtain of water that spread across the entire battlefield. The area was sealed instantly. There was nowhere left to run and nowhere left to hide. Within seconds, every remaining temple fighter had been wiped out. After the battle ended, Uncle Jed and the others did not approach the energy sphere. Ethan had warned them earlier. For some reason he had always felt something strange about that sphere. He had specifically told them to wait until he returned before getting any closer. When Ethan finally arrived, his first order was for everyone to stay where they were. He walked toward the sphere alone. The Twilight War Spear was still in his hand. Those golden and pink lights clinging to it still prevented him from storing it away, forcing him to carry it like this. When he reached the base of the massive sphere, Ethan rested the spear on his shoulder and reached out with one hand. His fingers passed straight through. Nothing. The sphere behaved like a projection. It had no physical substance at all. Ethan extended his perception to examine it. Still nothing. Yet the energy radiating from the sphere was very real. It poured outward like a massive fountain, and standing near it felt like standing inside a hurricane. His clothes snapped violently in the rushing energy currents. The waves of power surged toward him continuously, trying to seep through his pores and enter his body. But Ethan had suspected something was wrong with this energy long ago. So before approaching, he had already sealed every pore on his body with his own power. Unable to enter him, the energy waves continued to crash against him. However, they behaved strangely. The first wave attempted to force its way inside. When it failed, the energy simply flowed past him like a gentle wind. After that, the waves no longer tried to force entry. They just drifted past him and continued onward. Wave after wave in an endless circle. A normal person would never notice anything unusual, but Ethan's powerful soul senses made the difference clear. The energy waves reaching him were not the same each time. Every time a wave discovered it could not enter his body, it reacted almost like a bee discovering a flower that held no nectar. It would touch him briefly, realize there was nothing there for it, and then drift away. Definitely not normal, Ethan muttered. This energy behaves like sharks smelling blood when they sense the human body. Where is it coming from? His eyes narrowed as he studied the massive sphere. Disguised as pure energy, tempting people to absorb it. What's the real goal? Even the sphere itself might be nothing more than an illusion. If that were true, then where was the real source? Ethan slowly looked down at the ground beneath his feet. Underground. His senses plunged downward. 1 kilometer, nothing. He frowned. Where had this thing come from? Could not have appeared out of nowhere. With no immediate answers, Ethan slowly stepped back. Once he reached a safe distance, his body crackled with energy as the mech reformed around him. Shatterstar, he said calmly. I'm sending you the footage. Analyze it. The mech's eyes glowed blue as scanning mode activated. From bottom to top it scanned the entire sphere and the ground beneath it, recording every detail before transmitting the data to Shatterstar's core system. A response came quickly. Analyzing. Beep. Analysis complete. A stream of data appeared on Ethan's terminal. Shatterstar did not give a verbal explanation. Instead, it sent him a modified version of his scan with detailed annotations. The entire sphere was outlined and labeled. Illusory projection. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Just as he suspected. Something that could be seen but not touched or detected through perception could only be a projection. But projected from where? What exactly was it hiding? That question remained unanswered. The next label appeared beside the flowing energy. Divine Realm. Contaminant. Below the label was a data file. Divine Realm. Ethan murmured. This energy comes from the Divine Realm? More alarming was the second word. Contaminant. Ethan opened the file and a video began playing. The first scene showed an enormous starfield. Suddenly the fabric of space trembled violently. Something seemed to pierce through the barrier surrounding that starfield. Black gas poured through the breach, wave after wave. The moment it appeared, it scattered in every direction like a swarm of locusts. The next scene shifted to the surface of a planet. The inhabitants looked surprisingly similar to humans from Earth. But there were differences. Some people had snail-like antennae growing from their heads. Others had purple or green skin. Despite their strange appearances, they all shared one thing in common. Every single person wore a mech. Some had partial mechanical armor, while others were equipped with full-body systems similar to Ethan's. But that was not what captured Ethan's attention, it was the chaos. The same black gas waves from before descended upon the planet. They behaved like living creatures. Each wave targeted a single individual, and once it reached them, the gas forced its way into their body. Moments later, the fallen victims stood up again. Their eyes had turned completely black. No whites and no pupils. Then, like mindless wandering souls, they formed lines and began marching away in silence. Where they were going remained unknown. Then the video ended abruptly. Apparently whoever recorded it had been attacked as well. This footage is from where? Ethan asked. Shatterstar responded immediately. This recording originated from a remote, undeveloped planet located on the outer edge of the first universe. After this footage was received, the first universe initiated a planetary defense program. The first phase was destroyed within hours. The second phase was activated in response. That program created me. Ethan's expression darkened. So this is the Divine Realm contaminant you mentioned. How is it different from the energy we're seeing here? The current energy eruption contains traces of that substance. Concentration approximately 1/10,000th of the original sample. Extremely diluted. Ethan stared at the massive energy sphere. This so-called energy had already spread across the entire planet. Even if the contaminant existed at only 1/10,000th concentration, it was still entering countless human bodies. For now, it had not caused visible problems, but at higher concentrations, it would eventually produce the same results shown in the video. Those people had clearly been controlled, and where they marched afterward was unknown. Shatterstar's database contained only the initial recordings. It had lost contact with the first universe long ago. After leaving, it had crashed in the second universe and remained inactive for nearly 1,000 years. No one even knew how time flowed between the first and second universes. For all they knew, the first universe might already be completely overrun. An entire universe of life, unimaginable numbers of beings, possibly doomed. Divine Realm. Anger slowly burned in Ethan's chest. What exactly did that place want? Those victims had not been killed immediately. Unless, a sudden thought crossed his mind. Earth's own history was filled with invasion and colonization. Was the Divine Realm doing something similar? Did they lack population? Were they invading other universes to gather people and expand their own world? Divine Realm. Was divine simply a prettier word for void? Like, was it empty? Right now, the priority was stopping the massive surge of energy. If this eruption could be halted, perhaps the contaminant would no longer cross into their world. Or perhaps the energy itself originated from the divine realm. If that were true, then the divine realm's power reserves were truly terrifying. Ethan looked back at the video file again, carefully checking whether Shatterstar had marked any possible method of shutting the phenomenon down. Chapter 923. The Golden Pink Outburst. Long chapter. Ethan scanned the analysis again and confirmed that Shatterstar had not provided any notes or solutions. Really no way? He asked, his tone probing. Correct. My database contains no solution. The first universe's demise occurred precisely because of this. Otherwise, I would never have been created. Shatterstar's answer was absolute, delivered without hesitation or ambiguity. Ethan slowly nodded as he absorbed that. It made sense when he thought about it. Shatterstar itself existed because the first universe had failed to solve the problem. If they had found a solution, they would never have needed to pour all their remaining resources into building a desperate distress beacon like Shatterstar in the first place. Which meant one thing. He was stuck. This was not a problem he could fix alone. Ethan turned to leave, already planning to gather the others and discuss the situation with them. Two heads were better than one, and the people around him were far from ordinary. Now that he understood how dangerous this thing truly was, they needed to start thinking about how to deal with it before it spiraled completely out of control. More importantly, Ethan had always been clear about one thing. The greatest threat Earth faced did not come from its own world. It came from the divine realm. And if this was their doing, then it was almost certainly only the opening move. What Ethan really wanted to understand now was how the Divine Sea Temple connected to the divine realm. The temple had clearly chosen its side, willingly becoming their lackeys. Just thinking about it made Ethan's blood boil. He was fighting for this world with everything he had, risking his life again and again, while some of the people who actually lived here were selling it out from the inside. A slow, simmering rage spread through his chest. In Ethan's mind, the Divine Sea Temple had already become enemy number one. If he had the chance, he would wipe them out completely without the slightest hesitation. And then there was Zachary. Originally, that man had been the first name on Ethan's kill list. But now, Ethan almost felt a strange hint of pity for him. A man who had clawed his way up from nothing, only to be replaced by his own father at the critical moment. Earlier, Ethan had nearly killed Harrison himself. Then that mysterious figure in black had appeared and taken him away. Harrison was probably still alive, still salvageable. As for that black-robed figure, Ethan was almost certain of their identity. One of the temple masters of the Divine Sea Temple. Rumor said there were 4 great temples controlling the seas of the world. East, South, West, and North. The so-called 4 seas. Ethan did not know exactly how those territories were divided, but he was fairly sure the man who had appeared earlier was the temple master responsible for the waters around the U.S. And if the Divine Sea Temple could create something like this, then they must have some method behind it. Which raised an important question. Did they also know how to shut down this energy leak? The more Ethan thought about it, the clearer it became that the Divine Sea Temple had to be his next target. But the longer he dwelled on it, the angrier he became. The anger built in his chest until it felt like it might burst. If a member of the temple appeared in front of him right now, Ethan was fairly certain he would tear them apart with his bare hands. Then something unexpected happened. The light clinging to the Twilight War spear suddenly erupted outward without warning. Gold and pink light exploded from the weapon and spread in every direction around Ethan like a sudden wave. The burst was brief but intense. In the blink of an eye, the light expanded to cover nearly a kilometer before vanishing just as suddenly as it had appeared. Ethan stood there in complete shock. What the hell? His anger disappeared instantly, replaced by confusion. He stared down at his arm as he felt the strange magnetic light that had flowed from the spear into his body. After that brief eruption of light, the energy had traveled through the hand gripping the spear, moved into his arm, then through his chest before finally settling between 2 ribs near the lower part of his ribcage. There it pulsed faintly, brightening and dimming like a quiet heartbeat. Ethan blinked several times. Seriously? Am I some kind of trash can now? Why does everything keep crawling into my body? Right then, a sharp rushing sound cut through the air and several figures appeared almost instantly. Uncle Jed and the others. They had been stationed several kilometers away, but they had all seen the strange burst of light coming from Ethan's location and immediately rushed over, assuming something had gone wrong. What happened? Damn, boss. Did you just unleash some kind of ultimate move? Ethan, what was that just now? That was a pretty impressive light show. The group gathered around him, their eyes scanning the surroundings. Then everyone gradually realized something strange. The entire landscape had changed. Their camp had originally been located deep within a dense forest filled with ancient trees, so large that two people would struggle to wrap their arms around a single trunk. At this time of year the forest should have been lush and vibrant, filled with thick green foliage. But now there was not a single trace of green anywhere. Everything around them had turned gold and pink. The enormous trees, the grass, the flowers, even the fallen leaves scattered across the ground had all been transformed into a strange crystalline material in those same shimmering colors. Markham walked over to one of the ancient trees with curiosity and tapped the trunk lightly with his knuckles. Ding, ding. The sound that echoed back was sharp and metallic. The trunk no longer felt like wood at all. Curious, Markham drew his massive sword and swung it down against the trunk. Clang. The blade bounced off violently. Only a tiny chip appeared on the surface of the crystalline trunk, and several glittering fragments fell to the ground. Whoa! This thing's that hard? While Markham stared at the trunk in surprise, Dragonchild had already floated up into the air. She reached out and pinched a leaf between her fingers. With a gentle motion she snapped the stem. Crack! A gold-pink leaf broke free and fell into her palm, glittering faintly. She studied it quietly for a moment before raising her gaze and looking at the entire kilometer-wide area surrounding them. A faint confusion flickered across her eyes. Nearby, Evelyn activated her mech and floated upward as well. Wow! It's so pretty! Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she reached toward a nearby leaf. Dragonchild suddenly snapped out of her thoughts the moment she heard Evelyn's voice. Just as Evelyn's fingers were about to touch the leaf, Dragonchild shouted sharply, "Don't move!" Ah! Evelyn jumped in fright and froze mid-reach. "Dr. Dragon Sister, what's wrong?" The girl quickly switched to her usual sweet tone. She had long learned that calling her Dragon Sister tended to soften Dragonchild's temper. Dragonchild looked slightly awkward for a moment. Everyone else was staring at her in confusion. She hesitated briefly before speaking. I said don't touch it, so don't touch it. These shiny things are mine. Yes, all mine. Nobody gets any." Her voice started off a little uncertain, but by the end her tone had turned completely firm. Possessive. Almost greedy. Evelyn blinked in confusion. The rest of the group exchanged puzzled looks as well. What was going on with Dragonchild? Had something possessed her? Only Ethan, Markham, and Maria seemed to understand what was happening. Markham finally cleared his throat and spoke. "Evelyn, girl, dragons are hopeless when it comes to shiny but completely useless things. Don't compete with your dragon sister for them, or she might just eat you." He grinned up at Dragonchild as he said it. Dragonchild glared down at him sharply, but she did not deny it. Markham instinctively rubbed the bridge of his nose. This woman's mood was notoriously unpredictable. For a brief moment he regretted opening his mouth at all. Had he just offended her? Unfortunately, old habits were hard to break, and his mouth kept moving. Seeing Ethan watching him with a grin, while everyone else gave him sympathetic looks that clearly said, "Good luck," Markham quickly added another line. "Hey, if you really want more of this stuff, just have Ethan make it for you." He pointed toward Ethan casually. "He could probably build you an entire palace out of this kind of crystal. Should be easy for him, right? Right, boss?" Markham even turned to Ethan expectantly. Ethan's smile froze instantly. "Easy my ass." He kept that thought firmly inside his head. Dragonchild's eyes, however, nearly lit up the moment she heard Markham's words. She slowly turned to look at Ethan. Ever since their previous argument, she had barely acknowledged his existence. Their relationship had felt colder than that of complete strangers. But now, Ethan suddenly felt every pore on his body open, as if a cold wind had passed over him. The way Dragonchild looked at him now made him extremely uncomfortable. Her gaze reminded him of someone discovering a new favorite toy. Her eyes clearly asked the question. Was Markham telling the truth? I'm still working on it," Ethan said cautiously. "Not very proficient yet." His answer lacked confidence. Ethan suspected that the phenomenon around them was related to the power of the Buddha demon magnetic light. But the strange energy had settled in his chest and was simply pulsing there. He had tried to communicate with it, but there had been no response. Vasuki had claimed earlier that the energy had already been subdued. But if that was true, then why could Ethan not control it? And what exactly had just happened? Hearing Ethan's answer, Dragonchild slowly turned her head and fixed her gaze on the enormous crystalline tree nearby. Everyone assumed she was about to start collecting more leaves. Instead, she calmly raised one hand. Then she swept her palm horizontally through the air. A ribbon-like wave of energy spread out like flowing water. Everything in front of her that had been transformed into crystal, the trees, the grass, the flowers, instantly disintegrated into fine powder. What Markham's sword had failed to damage, she erased with a single casual motion. Her strength was terrifying. "If we can't take it," she said lightly, "then we destroy it all." Her voice sounded calm, but the meaning behind the words was anything but gentle. Especially for Ethan. A faint chill ran down the back of his neck. Ha! Just as I thought. Uncle Jed's voice suddenly broke the tense silence. Everyone turned toward him. He was crouching near the energy sphere and examining the ground closely. Find something? Ethan walked over and crouched beside him. Earlier Ethan had already scanned the area with his senses and had not detected anything unusual, even a kilometer underground. Have you noticed how unusually rich in energy the soil here is? Uncle Jed asked. Ethan nodded. That's not strange, though. With such a powerful energy leak nearby, it's normal for the soil to absorb some of it, right? Uncle Jed tilted his head and looked at Ethan with a faint smile. It was the exact expression someone used when staring at an idiot. Something wrong with that? Ethan asked. Tell me something, Uncle Jed said. What's the energy concentration like in the Sea of Death? About the same as around this sphere. Maybe slightly weaker, Ethan recalled. And if you went to the Sea of Death and ate a handful of dirt, would you absorb energy from it? The question caught Ethan completely off guard. How the hell would he know that? Before he could answer, Regis spoke from behind them. Energy exists within heaven and earth, but it does not normally exist inside physical matter. Soil, ordinary plants, mountains, rivers, none of them actually contain it. Ethan blinked. Huh. He genuinely had not known that. But here it's abnormal, Regis continued as he crouched down and let a handful of soil run through his fingers. The energy density in this top layer of soil is already approaching the point where it's starting to crystallize. Even a kilometer underground there's still energy present, though it gradually thins out. Ethan extended his senses again and confirmed that observation. Remember the dragon veins I mentioned before? Uncle Jed said. My guess is that this whole process is meant to crystallize the ground and create artificial veins that can connect with the real dragon veins beneath the earth. He paused briefly before continuing. If my guess is correct, once the entire area finishes crystallizing, they'll build something here designed to drain the power of those veins. Leo frowned slightly. Then why not just dig straight down? Why go through all this trouble? Uncle Jed rolled his eyes. You think dragon veins are easy to capture? Those things are the condensed power of heaven and earth itself. They may not be alive, but they're more formidable than most living creatures. Hey, old man. Leo shot back immediately. I'm not some burrowing beast that digs underground all day. I'm allowed to ask questions, right? What's with that look? Leo clearly had no intention of backing down. If Uncle Jed's theory was correct, then the Divine Realm had two separate objectives here. The strange contaminant inside Shatterstar targeted living creatures, while the erupting energy was meant to crystallize the Earth itself. They had used some special method to inject that energy underground, yet there were no visible traces of any formation arrays or magical constructs. Someone pointed out that since the energy clearly did not belong to this world, there should logically be some kind of spatial breach where it was leaking in from elsewhere. But no one had been able to detect any such disturbance. That was the strangest part of all. Even Ethan's senses had not detected the slightest spatial fluctuation near the epicenter of the eruption. Let's move on to the next location, Ethan finally said. This time try to capture prisoners if you can. You all push through the sites one by one. I'll bring Micah and Ryan with me. Those two are knowledgeable when it comes to formation arrays. Maybe they'll notice something we've missed. Since they were making no progress here, continuing to stay would only waste time. Boss, meeting up later? Victor asked while everyone began preparing to leave. No, Ethan replied after marking a point on the map. We rendezvous back here. He pointed at another direction on the map. I'll take Micah and Ryan and clear the remaining sites from this side. Move quickly. After giving those final instructions, Ethan immediately headed toward the hidden territory of the Silverwood family. The others watched him leave and exchanged glances. The kid's grown wings, Hank muttered while taking a swig from his flask. Yeah, Uncle Jed sighed. Already looking down on us and running off solo. Hope he still remembers the promise he made to me, Dragonchild added quietly. Otherwise. Far away, Ethan suddenly shivered while flying at high speed. He glanced around suspiciously. Who the hell was thinking about him just now? Not long afterward, Ethan arrived at the Silverwood family's hidden territory and quickly found Lila gathering the remaining forces. Earlier, those people had been stirred up by Ethan's mental influence and were supposed to be filled with fiery determination for the coming battle. But now that the moment of departure had actually arrived, hesitation and fear had begun creeping back into their hearts. Ethan's sudden return happened to coincide perfectly with this drop in morale. His figure streaked through the sky from the outer entrance to the restricted area in moments, and everyone present noticed him immediately. Whispers spread through the crowd. Why is he back already? He's moving so fast. Did something happen? Wait. He's not fleeing, is he? Yeah. He left with so many people but came back alone. Should we even go anymore? I don't want to become cannon fodder. The crowd, which had already been hesitant, grew even more suspicious. Ethan landed while two men followed behind him. Hey, you're still here? He said calmly while hovering slightly above the ground. Lila, Amber, and Rainey, dressed in tight combat gear, rose into the air to meet him. They quickly explained the situation. This group of fighters was like scattered sand, impossible to unite into a single force. Managing them had already given the three women a serious headache. Seriously, Ethan said, raising an eyebrow. You cowards actually dare to question my ability? He turned toward Lila. I'm sending you some footage. Show it to them. Actually, Rainey, you project it. He paused slightly when he noticed that Lila's mech control band was now on Rainey's wrist. Rainey nodded and prepared to activate the projection. At that moment, Ethan's gaze slowly swept across the crowd below. His eyes narrowed slightly. I'll tolerate this one doubt, he said calmly. But if it happens again, the penalty is death. For a brief second his killing intent surged outward like a blade. Then it vanished. But that single moment was enough. Everyone who had still harbored doubts felt cold sweat running down their backs. Not a single person dared to speak anymore. Chapter 9:24. The Fell Cannon Bluff. Long chapter. After finishing everything that needed to be done, Ethan brought Micah and Ryan with him as they left the hidden territory of Silverwood and headed straight towards Central Magnolia. He and Uncle Jed's group were moving in completely opposite directions. Uncle Jed's team was pushing south while Ethan led his small group north, the two sides gradually forming a wide arc that would eventually allow them to regroup later on. Along Uncle Jed's route there were 3 remaining energy sphere sites, and Ethan's path also contained 3 of them. Aside from the one near trunk line that Uncle Jed's team was currently heading toward, the other locations were all positioned inside densely populated urban areas. Before they separated, Ethan had given Uncle Jed a very clear instruction. Do not split the team. Stay together, concentrate your firepower, and destroy each site one at a time. He had been worried that dividing their forces would only weaken them. If something unexpected happened, they would not be able to respond quickly enough. After all, the Temple Master had managed to escape. That man had fled even while Vasuki was in his serpent form. He had run so quickly that Ethan, who had been fully focused on protecting Luna at the time, never had the chance to properly gauge the Temple Master's real strength. The only thing Ethan remembered clearly was that the man's aura had felt terribly chaotic, as if countless resentful spirits were clinging to his body all at once. It had been a complete mess. A normal person absorbing that much resentment would have gone mad long ago. As that thought crossed his mind, Ethan suddenly remembered the white-robed woman they had encountered earlier. Where exactly had she obtained those wraith spheres? Lost in that question, Ethan and the others continued traveling until Central Magnolia slowly came into view. They had been moving very quickly, but Ethan had intentionally chosen routes that passed through busy residential and commercial areas. As they moved through the city streets, he quietly observed the everyday lives of ordinary people. Nothing seemed particularly strange. The streets were lively and full of activity. Office workers hurried along sidewalks while cars crawled through intersections. Cafes were open, stores were busy, and the entire city carried on with a familiar rhythm. Everything looked calm and peaceful. It was almost as if the drastic changes happening in the world had nothing to do with them at all. The only subject Ethan occasionally overheard in passing conversations was Ethereal, the massively popular virtual reality game that had captured the attention of players everywhere. That, however, led his thoughts in a different direction. Right now, Ethereal itself was in a strange half-alive state. Faction wars had already begun. Across the United States server there were originally 4 major factions: East, South, West, and North. With the exception of the northern frontier, the other 3 regions had already unified their forces. After merging together, those 3 alliances launched repeated assaults against the Central Dominion's capital, Dragon City, the only true faction capital left in the region. Several attacks had already taken place and each one ended with heavy losses. Meanwhile, the remaining northern frontier had turned into something almost absurd to watch. This relatively small war zone had somehow formed a bizarre 3-way balance of power. In the early days of the game, Ethan's Renegade Alliance had swept across the northern frontier like an unstoppable storm. For a long time they dominated everything in their path. But eventually their momentum slowed. Part of the reason was that their leader, not a druid, had not logged in for nearly a year and a half. With the real leader absent, the alliance shifted into a more cautious phase of development while the honorary leader handled management. At the same time, another faction began rising rapidly. The Blade Syndicate, which had originally been supported by the Steel Consortium, had once been thoroughly crushed by Renegade Alliance. Their early attempts at expansion had been completely suppressed. However, things changed when they recruited a terrifying powerhouse. That player had once had a falling out with Renegade Alliance's leader, not a druid. His name was Meatball. Meatball had obtained a hidden class that allowed him to summon massive undead armies. When he fought seriously, he was practically equivalent to an army of 100,000 players. Wherever he went, cities and territories fell. His arrival was the turning point that allowed Blade Syndicate to reverse their decline. During the brutal Fortress Wars, without Meatball's presence, Blade Syndicate would not have been able to hold even a single advanced fortress. Everyone knew that Renegade Alliance had been watching them closely the entire time. However, the members of that squad were not meant to die in battle. They were meant to be killed by Get-Rich-Quick himself. The reason was simple. Get-Rich-Quick possessed an ultimate skill capable of destroying buildings, and every time he killed a player, the cooldown on that skill reset. That tactic alone made Blade Syndicate extremely cautious. Get-Rich-Quick was also an incredibly slippery player. Somehow he always managed to infiltrate the areas surrounding Blade Syndicate's heavily defended fortresses. Once he got within range, even if he was discovered, he would simply unleash his ultimate ability and then flee. His ultimate skill manifested as a gigantic sword nearly 1 kilometer long. Anything it touched died instantly. Even getting close to it meant certain death. When the blade struck the ground, it split the earth apart, causing lava to erupt from the cracks, and the flowing lava continued damaging any buildings it touched. However, after Meatball appeared, the situation changed dramatically. Using a single move called Undead Cataclysm, he directly seized control of an advanced fortress. Advanced fortresses were very different from ordinary ones. Meatball simply overwhelmed the defenders using endless waves of undead soldiers. Pure numbers won the battle. The fortress defenses remained almost entirely intact, and once those systems were fully operational, Get-Rich-Quick could no longer get close enough to unleash his ultimate attack. The last time he was seen was particularly embarrassing. He had been spotted by fortress archers from nearly a kilometer away. In a panic, he hurled his giant sword prematurely, but the tip of the blade stopped dozens of meters short of the fortress wall. A moment later, the fortress's massive ballista fired. The bolt pierced straight through his body. Instant kill. After that humiliating defeat, Get-Rich-Quick disappeared completely. Blade Syndicate then entered a long period of stable development. Meanwhile, another force emerged in the city of Blackridge. The Nocturne Order somehow managed to acquire an advanced fortress through mysterious means. They began recruiting all the smaller guilds that had previously been abandoned by the Steel Consortium and eventually formed an incredibly powerful alliance. Under Nocturne Order's leadership, those guilds were allowed to settle inside the main city itself, ensuring that their organizations would not collapse or dissolve. As a result, the northern frontier now had 3 major cities and 3 major powers. Among them, the most uncomfortable position belonged to Blade Syndicate. To their south stood Renegade Alliance like a tiger blocking the road. To join the battle for Dragon City, they would need to pass directly through Renegade territory. Originally, players could simply teleport from Springhaven to Harmony City by paying a fee. But because Renegade Alliance controlled 4 advanced fortresses in the region, they possessed significant authority within Harmony City's systems. They actually had the power to shut down Springhaven's teleportation route entirely. Players from Springhaven who wanted to reach Harmony City now had to travel on foot. However, Renegade Alliance had established defensive lines across the border. Any player from Springhaven who stepped into Harmony City's territory was killed on sight without exception. The purpose was obvious: they were completely blocking the path. Because of this, players from Springhaven now hated Renegade Alliance in Harmony City with a burning passion. The two sides slaughtered each other constantly whenever they crossed paths. Yet Harmony City's players were strangely unified. Killing Springhaven players had become as easy and routine as chopping vegetables. Ironically, this relentless hostility also forced the Springhaven players to unite against their common enemy. They gathered together as well. At one point, Zachary and Marcus Gaynor personally traveled to Blackridge several times to negotiate with the leader of Nocturne Order, a woman named Xandria. Unfortunately, they only received one response. "Where were you back then? What were you thinking when you abandoned us? Get lost, and stay lost." Xandria was a tall woman with a mature, striking figure. Whenever she met with Zachary and Marcus, she deliberately removed the veil covering her face. But when that sweet, baby-like voice came out of her mouth, both men seemed to short-circuit. Seeing her in person, their reactions were not much better than Ethan's had been the first time. Marcus even blurted out, "Holy mother of..." He nearly slid off his chair in shock. That outburst only made Xandria angrier. She immediately ordered them thrown out. The two men had barely left the city when thousands of rogues suddenly appeared and ambushed them. Their entire escort was assassinated within seconds, leaving only the 2 guild leaders standing in the middle of a silent circle of blades. Then the rogues began taking turns stabbing them. for a full 30 minutes. Only after that long humiliation did someone finally cut their throats. When Zachary and Marcus respawned, they returned furious and humiliated. From that moment onward, Blade Syndicate and Nocturne Order became sworn enemies. More than a year of constant friction followed. Blade Syndicate now found themselves trapped between two hostile forces: Renegade Alliance to the south and the Nocturne Order Alliance to the north. Of course, Renegade Alliance was not completely comfortable either. When the war zone borders eventually opened, Blade Syndicate secretly contacted the other 3 regions and requested their assistance. Those 3 regions hoped to unify every war zone, because doing so would reduce Dragon City's defensive strength by 40%. So they arrived in grand fashion and left in disgrace. At first they hesitated because they feared Harmony City's defensive systems might be linked together. However, once they arrived, they discovered that Renegade Alliance had not activated any city shields at all. Instead, the Alliance had simply formed battle lines and waited. As the massive coalition army prepared to charge what looked like a pitifully small Renegade Alliance force, a thunderous explosion suddenly shook the battlefield. A massive artillery shell wrapped in eerie green flames landed directly in the middle of the advancing army. A mushroom cloud rose into the sky. That single shot instantly erased nearly a quarter of the coalition's forces and shattered their morale. Then they saw something even more terrifying. Within Renegade Alliance's formation, a massive passage slowly opened. The ground began to tremble as engines roared. Colossal war machines slowly rolled forward. Holy shit! Is that a tank? Almost every surviving soldier from the coalition thought the exact same thing. They stared in disbelief. The thing looked like a tank, but it was absurdly enormous, nearly 30 to 40 meters tall. Standing on top of the metal giant was a single figure with one hand resting behind his back, looking incredibly smug while holding a microphone. "Hey, you bastards from the 3 regions. Come on. Try a taste of the Mad Engineer's demonic fell cannon." The coalition army was stunned. They had never seen anything like this before. Sure, it resembled a tank, but it was far too large to be believable. And the weapon mounted on top, the so-called demonic fell cannon, looked like something pulled straight out of a nightmare. How had Renegade Alliance even built something like that? How were they still this powerful? Their leader had been offline for so long, yet the guild remained terrifyingly dominant. The commanders of the coalition forces, every guild leader present, suddenly felt a crushing sense of helplessness. It was as if Renegade Alliance had become an immovable mountain pressing down on them. As long as that mountain existed, there would never be room for them on the stage of history. That realization gnawed at their pride. "Come on, face my wrath. Prepare, load." The enormous cannon emitted a heavy metallic clank as its barrel slowly retracted and began glowing with an ominous light. "Retreat! Retreat now!" The shout spread through the coalition ranks like a spark touching dry grass. Players instantly turned and ran. Their courage collapsed in an instant. Some shouted wildly as they fled. "Holy hell, run! I came here to fight, not become cannon fodder. The guy who just got blown up was my friend. He messaged me before logging off. He lost 10 levels. What? 10 levels? That's impossible. You only lose 20% experience when you die. No, seriously. I checked. That thing is cursed. Run." The battlefield dissolved into complete chaos. Alliance commanders screamed orders and even killed a few deserters in an attempt to restore discipline. But it was pointless. How could a handful of officers possibly stop millions of panicked players from scattering in every direction like frightened monkeys? The retreat turned into a massive stampede, and 2 unfortunate commanders were even trampled to death by their own soldiers. More than 10 minutes later, the battlefield was completely empty. Only chaotic footprints remained. The once million-man army had vanished. Only after confirming that everyone was gone did the figure standing on top of the fell cannon finally sit down heavily. "Damn. Good thing that bluff worked. One shell cost 700,000 gold, and this cannon took 3 months to build. We can't afford another shot." The man speaking was one of Ethan's most trusted subordinates. The Mad Engineer himself, no paper on the big one. Standing beside him was a woman who also looked deeply relieved. She was not a stranger Victor's wife, the honorary leader of Renegade Alliance. Tears of the Fallen. After Ethan disappeared, several of the guild's original pillars gradually stopped logging in as often. Lila, Ryan, Victor, and Williams were once the 4 leaders who held the alliance together. But their activity slowly declined. Lila in particular logged out 1 month after Ethan vanished and never logged in again. As a result, nearly all of Renegade Alliance's management responsibilities eventually fell onto Celia's shoulders. She had never expected things to turn out this way. Originally, she had simply married Victor and moved from Harbor City to Ember City with him. Before finding a stable job in real life, She planned to temporarily help Ethan manage a few logistical tasks in the game. That was all. She thought she would just handle background support. But the moment she accepted the honorary leader title, Ethan disappeared without a word and effectively became an absentee boss. 2 full years passed. During the first half-year he occasionally appeared, but afterward he vanished completely. Celia knew fragments of Ethan's situation, but Victor never told her the full story. It was the one subject he absolutely refused to explain. Several times in real life she exploded in anger at him. Victor only repeated the same line. "The less you know about Ethan, the safer it is for us." Those words left Celia endlessly complaining. Yet when it came to work she still devoted herself completely to Renegade Alliance's development. Even while restricted to the Harmony City region, the guild's income remained impressive. As honorary leader she had access to everything the Alliance possessed, and even if she found another job in real life it would never pay nearly as well. Of course, women had their moods. At this moment Celia herself was also staying inside the hidden territory of the Silverwoods. She had already heard about the events happening outside. Just a moment ago, from the Silverwood residence perched high on the mountain, she clearly watched Ethan enter and leave the area. Seeing the arrogant, imposing, almost murderous confidence he carried with him, Celia curled her lips slightly. Finally back. If he stayed gone any longer, even Lila would have broken. She murmured the words quietly to herself. Her gaze then shifted toward Lila and the other 2 women nearby, and a faint smile appeared on her face. She was genuinely happy for them. After spending more than a year together, women who had no conflicting interests often became close friends very easily. Besides, Celia was not much older than Lila. Back when she had still been a little girl, Victor had rescued her during an operation. From that moment on she had made a stubborn vow that one day she would marry him. That promise, and the waiting that followed, lasted more than 10 years. Sometimes she even wondered whether Victor would still have rejected her if Ethan had not stepped in to help. "Go do what you need to do," Celia whispered softly to the empty room. "What you entrusted to me, I'll protect it." After saying that, she turned and walked back to her room. Ethan naturally knew none of this. He had no idea that Celia quietly felt a deep sense of gratitude toward him. Victor did not know either. Those angry outbursts Celia had directed at him earlier had never truly been complaints. They had simply been the worried concerns of someone who saw Ethan as the benefactor who had changed her life. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.